The distress beacon had been broadcasting for 6 days as Thara stood at the communication console, her pale blue skin flickering with the soft bioluminescence that all Velen carried from birth. The light patterns moving across her body showed her fear, her exhaustion, her fading hope. She had sent the message to every channel she knew. She had begged the Galactic Council for help. She had pleaded with neighboring systems. She had called out to passing ships. No one answered. No one came. Through the reinforced windows of the colony's central tower, she could see the Krath ships hanging in the sky like dark omens, 12 warships, bristling with weapons, blocking every escape route from Velith Prime. They had arrived without warning, dropping out of faster-than-light travel and immediately establishing a blockade around the peaceful world. The Velen were not warriors. They had never been warriors. For 10,000 years, they had devoted themselves to art, to medicine, to the cultivation of beauty in all its forms. Their bioluminescent bodies produced compounds that could heal wounds, cure diseases, and ease suffering. They were known across the galaxy as healers and artists, gentle souls who contributed to civilization through creation rather than destruction. And now they were prey. "Colony leader," said Torith, her young assistant, his skin pulsing with anxious yellow light. "The Krath commander is broadcasting again." As Thara closed her eyes, she already knew what the message would say, that Krath had made their demands clear from the first day. They wanted 1,000 Velen volunteers to be handed over for harvesting. The luminescent organs that made the Velen so beautiful were worth fortunes on the black markets of the outer systems. Rich criminals and cruel collectors paid enormous sums for Velen glands, which they used to create illegal drugs and exotic decorations. The harvesting process was fatal. "Play it," she said. The harsh voice of Warlord Thesk filled the room. He was a Krath, a species that had rejected civilization in favor of raiding and conquest. His people lived in the lawless regions beyond council space, taking what they wanted from those too weak to stop them. "People of Velith Prime," the recording growled, "your time grows short. You have refused our generous offer. You have called for help that will never come. The council does not care about you. Your neighbors fear us too much to act. You are alone." Astara's light patterns shifted to deep purple, the color of grief. "Tomorrow we begin orbital bombardment of your agricultural centers," Thesk continued. "Your people will starve. Your children will cry for food. And still we will wait, because we are patient hunters. Eventually, you will give us what we want. You will give us your 1,000 volunteers, or you will give us your entire population, one way or another." The message ended. Tarath's skin had gone almost dark, the light barely visible. "What do we do?" he whispered. Estera had no answer. She had done everything she could. The Galactic Council had responded to her distress. Calls with expressions of deep concern and promises to investigate the situation through proper channels. The investigation, they explained, would require committee approval, diplomatic consultations, risk assessments, and formal votes. The process could take months. They did not have months. They did not have weeks. They had hours. The colony held 2.3 million Velen families, children, elders, artists, healers, all of them looking to her for salvation she could not provide, all of them trusting that somehow, someone would come to save them. She walked to the window and looked up at the Krath ships. They were ugly things, built for intimidation and violence. Their hulls were scarred from countless raids, marked with the symbols of 100 conquered worlds. The Krath did not create, they only took. "Send another message," Esthera said quietly. "To whom?" Torith asked. "We have tried everyone. Send it to everyone again. Send it on every frequency, every channel, every band. Send it into the void itself." She turned to face her assistant, and her bioluminescence shifted to white, the color of desperate determination. "If we are going to die, we will die calling for help. We will not go silently." Torith nodded and began preparing the broadcast. Esthara composed her words carefully. She did not beg this time. She did not plead or bargain. She simply told the truth. "This is Colony Leader Astara of Velith Prime. Our world is under siege by the Krath Dominion. We are a peaceful people. We have no weapons, no warriors, no means to defend ourselves. We have called upon the Galactic Council, but they cannot act in time. We have called upon our neighbors, but they are afraid." She paused, gathering her strength. "We have 2.3 million souls on this world. Families who have lived here for generations, children who have never known violence, healers who have devoted their lives to easing the suffering of others. Tomorrow, the Krath will begin destroying our ability to feed ourselves. After that, they will take our people for harvesting." Her voice remained steady, though her light patterns betrayed her anguish. "I do not know who will hear this message. I do not know if anyone is listening. But if you are out there, if you can hear my voice, please know that we are here. We exist, we matter, and we are asking, with whatever time we have left, for someone to remember that we lived, for someone to care that we are dying." She ended the transmission and stood in silence. The hours passed. The Krath ships maintained their positions. The colony's people huddled in their homes, holding their children, whispering prayers to gods who seemed very far away. Astara did not sleep. She sat at the communication console, watching the empty screens, listening to the static of the universe. She had done everything she could. Now all she could do was wait for the end. Dawn came to Velith Prime, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful, as all dawns were on this world. The Velen had chosen this planet for its beauty, for its gentle climate, for the way the light played across the crystalline formations that dotted the landscape. It would be the last dawn for many of them. The Krath ships began to move, repositioning for their bombardment run. Astara watched them through the window, her light patterns fading to the dull gray of acceptance, and then the sensor console chimed. Torith rushed to check it, his skin suddenly blazing with shocked yellow light. Colony leader, there is something. A ship at the edge of the system. Astara turned. Council forces. No, Tarath's voice was confused. The configuration is unknown. The computer cannot identify it. It is not in our database. Hope flickered in Astara's chest, fragile and uncertain. She pushed it down. It could be anyone. It could be nothing. It could be more enemies. Can you get a visual? Torith worked the controls, and the main screen flickered to life. The image was grainy with distance, but Astara could make out the shape of a single ship. It was smaller than the Krath vessels, built with clean lines and efficient curves. On its hull, she could see markings in a language she did not recognize. The ship was moving toward them, aboard the Krath flagship. Warlord Thesk received the report of the approaching vessel with amusement. One ship, one tiny ship coming to challenge his fleet. He laughed, a harsh and ugly sound. Scan it, he ordered. His tactical officer obeyed. It appears to be a destroyer-class vessel, Warlord. Configuration matches nothing in our records. Wait, I am detecting a species identification beacon. They call themselves humans. Thesk searched his memory. Humans, he had heard the name before. A young species, new to the stars, from some unremarkable world in a distant sector. They had only recently joined the galactic community. They were considered soft, weak, barely worth noticing. One human ship, Thesk said, grinning at his bridge crew. They must be lost. Open a channel. Tell them to leave immediately, or share the fate of this pathetic colony. The communication was sent. For a long moment, there was no response. Then, a voice came through the speakers, calm and steady and utterly unafraid. This is Captain Yuki Tanaka of the United Earth Navy vessel Resolute. You have 15 minutes to withdraw from this system, or we will remove you from it. Thesk stared at the speaker in disbelief. Then he began to laugh. On the surface of Velith Prime, Estera heard the human captain's words through the intercepted transmission. She looked at Torith, her light patterns shifting to colors she could not name. Someone had answered. Someone had come. The bridge of the UEN Resolute was quiet, except for the hum of the engines and the soft beeping of sensor consoles. Captain Yuki Tanaka stood at the center of it all, her dark eyes fixed on the tactical display that showed 12 hostile ships surrounding a small blue world. She had not expected this when she woke up this morning. The Resolute was on a survey mission, mapping stellar formations in a remote sector far from Earth's growing sphere of influence. It was routine work, important but unglamorous. They were supposed to chart navigation hazards and identify potential resources. They were not supposed to get involved in alien conflicts. But then the distress call had come through. Captain, said Lieutenant Chen, her tactical officer, I have to advise against this course of action. Noted, Tanaka replied. We are one ship against 12. We are far outside Earth territory. We have no backup, no support, and no authority in this region. Chen's voice was steady, professional. He was doing his job, making sure she understood the situation. The Galactic Council has not requested our assistance. Intervening here could cause serious diplomatic problems for Earth. Also noted, Commander Sarah Wells. Her executive officer stepped closer. Yuki, she said quietly, using her captain's first name in the way she only did when they were speaking as friends rather than officers. I know what you're thinking. I know what kind of person you are. But this isn't our fight. Tanaka turned to look at her old friend. They had served together for years, survived battles and crises side by side. Wells knew her better than almost anyone. Played the distress call again, Tanaka said. Wells hesitated, then nodded to the communications officer. The voice of colony leader Astara filled the bridge once more. It was a voice heavy with exhaustion and grief, a voice that had given up hope but refused to stop trying. The words spoke of children and families, of healers who had spent their lives helping others, of 2.3 million souls waiting to be harvested like animals. The message ended with a simple plea. Remember that we lived, care that we are dying. Silence fell over the bridge. Tanaka looked at her crew. They were good people, every one of them. They had joined the United Earth Navy because they believed in something larger than themselves. They had traveled to the stars because they wanted to explore, to discover, to make a difference. I'm not going to order anyone to do this, she said. What I'm about to do will put this ship and everyone on it at risk. It may end our careers. It may end our lives. If anyone wants to formally object and have it recorded in the log, now is the time. No one spoke. Lieutenant Chen Tanaka continued. If we engage, what are our chances? Chen studied his console. The craft vessels are older models, poorly maintained. Their weapons are powerful but inaccurate. Their tactics are typically aggressive but unsophisticated. He paused. In a straight fight, we would lose. But if we use the terrain, exploit their weaknesses, and fight smart. He shook his head. Honestly, Captain, I don't know. Maybe 40% chance of survival. Maybe less. 40%, Tanaka repeated. I've faced worse odds when... Wells asked. Tanaka smiled slightly. I'll think of an example later. She turned back to the main view screen where the distant shape of Velith Prime glowed against the blackness of space. Somewhere down there, millions of people were waiting to die. They had called for help, and the galaxy had ignored them. But the Resolute had heard. Helm, Tanaka said. Set course for Velith Prime. Maximum speed. Aye, Captain. The helmsman responded. The ship surged forward, its engines pushing it toward the distant confrontation. Around her, the crew began preparing for battle without being asked. They ran diagnostics on weapons systems, checked shield generators, verified ammunition counts. They knew what was coming. Captain, said the communications officer, the craft flagship is hailing us. They're telling us to leave or be destroyed. Open a channel. The view screen flickered and the face of a craft appeared. Warlord Thesk was large even by his species standards, his gray skin marked with scars and ritual tattoos. His eyes were small and cruel, and his mouth was full of sharp teeth that he displayed in what might have been a smile. Human vessel, he said. You are either very brave or very stupid. I have 12 ships. You have one. Turn around and leave, and I will let you live. Tanaka studied the alien face. She had read about the craft in intelligence briefings. They were raiders, slavers, killers. They preyed on the weak and took what they wanted. They had never faced serious opposition because they chose their targets carefully, attacking only those who could not fight back. This is Captain Yuki Tanaka of the United Earth Navy, she said, her voice calm and clear. You have 15 minutes to withdraw from this system, or we will remove you from it. Desk's expression flickered with confusion, then amusement. You cannot be serious. I am always serious, Warlord. 15 minutes, starting now. She gestured for the communication to be cut. The bridge was silent for a moment. Then Wells let out a long breath. Well, she said, that's done. How do we plan to actually back up that threat? Chen asked. Tanaka walked to the tactical console and began studying the display. The craft fleet was arranged in a loose formation around Velith Prime, their ships positioned to prevent any escape from the colony. It was a blockade formation, designed to contain rather than engage. They're not expecting a fight, she said. Look at their positioning. They're spread out to cover all escape vectors, not concentrated for combat. If we hit them fast and hard, we can take out several ships before they can regroup. And then we improvise. Tanaka tapped the console, highlighting the planet's moon. This moon has significant mass. We can use it for cover, break their formation, force them to chase us. The Krath are used to hunting prey, not fighting predators. We need to make them feel hunted. Chen studied the plan. It's risky. Everything about this is risky. I like it, Wells said. She was grinning now, the look she always got before combat. These Krath have never fought humans before. They don't know what we can do. Tanaka nodded. That's our advantage. They think we're soft. They think we're weak. They're about to learn otherwise. The minutes ticked by. The Resolute continued its approach, engines burning hot, crew at battle stations. On the surface of Velith Prime, the Velen watched the approaching ship with hope and terror mixing in their hearts. Colony leader Esthara tried to contact the human vessel. When the connection was established, she found herself looking at a human woman with short black hair and eyes like dark steel. Captain Tanaka, Esthara said, I am grateful beyond words that you have come, but I must warn you, you are badly outnumbered. That Krath will destroy your ship. Please, save yourself. We cannot ask you to die for us. Tanaka's expression softened slightly. Colony leader, we received your distress call. We came, that's what humans do. But why? You do not know us. We have never met your species. We have nothing to offer you, no way to repay you. We're not asking for payment. Tanaka's voice was quiet but firm. Some things you do because they're right, not because you expect reward. There are people here who need help. We can help. That's enough. Esthara felt her bioluminescence shifting to colors that had no name, colors that spoke of emotions too complex for words. This human, this stranger from a distant world, was willing to die for people she had never met. Captain Tanaka, she said, if you die here today, my people will remember you forever. We will teach our children your name. We will. Let's focus on not dying first, Tanaka interrupted, but there was warmth in her voice. Get your people to shelter. This is about to get dangerous. The communication ended. On the Resolute, the countdown reached 0. Time's up, Wells said. Tanaka straightened in her command chair. Around her, her crew was ready. They were afraid. She knew, of course they were afraid, but they were also determined. All hands. This is the captain. Her voice carried through every corridor and compartment of the ship. We are about to engage a superior enemy force to protect innocent lives. The odds are against us. The smart thing would be to leave. She paused. But we're not here because it's smart. We're here because there are people down there who called for help and no one answered. We're here because we're human beings, and this is what human beings do. We show up. We fight for those who can't fight for themselves. We stand in the darkness and refuse to let it win." The crew listened in silence. "Today we show the galaxy what humanity is made of. Today we answer the call. Let's get to work." She turned to the helm. "Take us in. Attack speed." The Resolute leaped forward, a single ship against impossible odds, carrying the hopes of millions on its shoulders. The battle for Velith Prime had begun. Warlord Thesk stood on his bridge and watched the tiny human ship approach. His crew looked at him with expectation, waiting for orders, but he was in no hurry. This would be entertaining. "They are actually coming," said his tactical officer, a scarred veteran named Korth. "One ship against 12. They must be insane." "Perhaps," Thesk replied. "Or perhaps they are simply young. Young species often have more courage than sense. They have not learned yet that the galaxy does not reward heroism." He settled into his command chair, the massive throne of metal and bone that proclaimed his status as warlord. Around him, the bridge hummed with activity as his crew prepared for what they expected to be a brief and one-sided engagement. "Should I order the fleet to intercept?" Korth asked. "No." Thesk waved a dismissive hand. "Let them come. Let them see our strengths. Perhaps when they realize what they face, they will turn and run. It would be amusing to chase them." The human ship continued its approach, neither slowing nor changing course. It flew straight toward the Krath formation like an arrow aimed at the heart of their fleet. On the surface of Velith Prime, the Velen watched the skies. The bioluminescent patterns on their skin flickered with hope and fear in equal measure. In the central shelter, colony leader Esthara had ordered all broadcasts to be displayed on the main screens. If this human captain was going to die for them, the least they could do was witness it. "The human ship is entering weapons range," Torth reported, his voice barely above a whisper. Esthara said nothing. She simply watched. Aboard the Resolute, Captain Tanaka studied the tactical display with intense focus. The Krath ships were exactly where she expected them to be, spread out in a loose net around the planet. It was a formation designed for containment, not combat. They were hunters surrounding trapped prey, not warriors expecting a fight. "Lieutenant Chen," she said, "time to first contact." 30 seconds, Captain. "Lock weapons on the 3 nearest vessels. Target their engine sections." "Locked." Tanaka took a breath. This was the moment. Everything she had planned, everything she had asked of her crew, it all came down to the next few minutes. Fire. The Resolute's weapons blazed to life. Twin plasma cannons hurled bolts of superheated energy across the void, while missile tubes launched their deadly cargo in coordinated salvos. The ship shook with the force of its own attack. The 3 nearest Krath ships never knew what hit them. They had been sitting in relaxed patrol positions, their crews probably eating or sleeping or playing games. They had not raised full shields. They had not activated point defense systems. They had not believed anyone would actually attack them. The first ship took 2 plasma bolts directly to its engine section. The explosions ripped through its hull, tearing the vessel in half in a shower of fire and debris. The second ship managed to get its shields up, but the missiles were already too close. They slammed into the flickering barrier and overloaded it in a cascade of energy, then continued through to detonate against the ship's unprotected hull. The vessel spun away, burning and crippled. The third ship was luckier. Its crew reacted faster, bringing weapons and shields online in time to absorb most of the initial attack. It survived, damaged but operational. But by then, the Resolute was already moving. "Full power to engines," Tanaka ordered. "Take us around their flank. Chen, keep firing at targets of opportunity." The human ship blazed past the wreckage of the first attack, moving faster than the Krath had anticipated. Their vessels began to turn, trying to bring weapons to bear. But the Resolute was already gone, using its superior speed and maneuverability to stay ahead of their firing solutions. On the Krath flagship, Thesk rose from his throne with a roar of fury. "What is happening? How did they destroy my ships?" "They attacked without warning," Korth replied, his voice stunned. "They did not follow standard engagement protocols. They did not identify themselves or demand surrender. They simply attacked. I can see that." Thesk slammed his fist against the arm of his throne. "Find them. Destroy them." The Krath fleet began to reorganize, their ships converging on the fast-moving human vessel. But the Resolute was not behaving like any opponent they had faced before. Instead of fleeing or standing to fight, it wove between their ships, using their own bulk as cover, firing precise shots that targeted weak points in vulnerable systems. 2 more Krath ships fell in the next few minutes. One took a missile strike to its ammunition storage and exploded in a spectacular fireball. Another lost engine power after repeated hits to its reactor systems and began drifting helplessly, unable to contribute to the fight. "They are using our fleet against us," Korth said, disbelief in his voice. "They fly through our formation, make us afraid to fire for fear of hitting our own ships." Thesk watched the tactical display with growing rage. 5 of his ships were gone or disabled. 5 ships lost to a single enemy vessel that should have been easy prey. "Concentrate the fleet," he ordered. "All ships, tight formation. Do not let them divide us. It was the wrong decision, and somewhere deep inside, Thesk knew it. But his pride would not allow him to retreat, not from one tiny ship, not from these pathetic humans. On the Resolute, Commander Wells monitored their damage reports. They had not escaped unscathed. Several hits from Krath weapons had breached outer hull sections. 2 crew members were in the medical bay with injuries. One of their plasma cannons was operating at reduced capacity. We can't keep this up forever, she told Tanaka quietly. They're starting to coordinate. That tight formation will limit our maneuverability. I know, Tanaka replied, but look at them. They're bunching up exactly like I hoped. Wells studied the display and saw what her captain meant. The remaining Krath ships were drawing together, trying to protect each other. But in doing so, they were leaving gaps in their coverage, areas where a fast ship could slip through. The moon, Wells said. You're going to use the moon. Tanaka smiled. Helm, set course for the planet's moon. Take us behind it, Captain. The Resolute broke away from the engagement, racing toward the silvery sphere that hung in space near Veleth Prime. The Krath fleet gave chase, their ships firing as they pursued. But the human vessel was faster, and the distance grew with each passing second. They run, Thesk shouted. After them. Do not let them escape. The Krath fleet accelerated, their engines straining as they chased the fleeing human ship. They followed the Resolute around the curve of the moon, eager to catch their prey, and exact vengeance for their fallen comrades. They did not see the trap until it was too late. As the Krath ships came around the moon, they found the Resolute waiting for them. But the human ship was not fleeing anymore. It had used the moon for cover, killed its momentum, and repositioned itself for a perfect attack run. Fire everything, Tanaka said. The Resolute unleashed its full arsenal. Missiles, plasma, kinetic rounds, everything the ship could throw. The weapons slammed into the lead Krath vessels with devastating effect, tearing through shields weakened by the sustained pursuit. 2 more ships died in that ambush. A third suffered critical damage and fell out of formation, venting atmosphere from a dozen breaches. The remaining 4 Krath ships finally got their weapons locked and returned fire. The Resolute shuddered as impact struck its shields. Warning alarms began to sound, but Tanaka held her ground, trading fire with the enemy, refusing to retreat. Shields at 40%, Chen reported. Hull breaches on decks 3 and 5. Casualty reports coming in. Keep firing, Tanaka ordered. Target the flagship. The battle raged around the moon of Veleth Prime, filling the void with fire and destruction. On the planet's surface, Devellin watched the distant flashes of light and wept with joy and terror mixed together. Astara gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles white, her bioluminescence blazing in patterns that spoke of desperate hope. The human ship was still fighting. Despite everything, despite the overwhelming odds, it was still fighting. They will not give up, she whispered. Why will they not give up? Toroth stood beside her, his skin glowing with colors that matched hers. Perhaps, he said quietly, because they are human. In the void above, the Resolute continued its impossible battle. The ship was wounded now, trailing smoke and debris, its shields failing. But its weapons still fired, and its crew still fought. And Captain Yuki Tanaka still stood at her command, refusing to surrender, refusing to die, refusing to abandon the people who had called out for help. 4 Krath ships remained. The odds were still against her. But the odds had been against her from the beginning, and she was still standing. The Resolute was burning. Fire suppression systems struggled to contain blazes on 3 decks. Emergency bulkheads had sealed off sections where the hull had been breached. The ship's once smooth exterior was now scarred with weapon impacts and torn metal. It looked like something that should be dead, but it kept fighting, Captain. Tanaka gripped the arms of her command chair as another hit shook the ship. The lights flickered. Somewhere below, she could hear the groaning of stressed metal as the ship's frame protested the abuse it was taking. Shields down to 12%, Lieutenant Chen reported. His console was sparking, and there was blood on his forehead from a cut he had not bothered to treat. Forward plasma cannon is offline. We have maybe 6 missiles left. What about them? Chen studied his damaged sensors. 4 ships remaining. The flagship, 2 escorts, and 1 that's barely holding together. For ships, the Resolute had destroyed 8 Krath vessels in combat. It was an incredible achievement, something that would be studied at military academies for generations. But it was not enough. Commander Wells appeared at Tanaka's side. Her uniform was torn and stained with smoke, and she was limping from an injury to her leg. Yuki, she said quietly, using her first name again. We've done everything we can. We've given them a fight they'll never forget. But we can't win this. Tanaka did not answer immediately. She looked at the tactical display, at the 4 remaining enemy ships closing in for the kill. They were wounded too, she noticed. Their own ships showed damage from the battle. They were not the overwhelming force they had been when this started. How many casualties? She asked. 11 dead. 23 wounded. Wells' voice was heavy. Engineering says we have maybe 10 more minutes of combat effectiveness before the reactor fails. 10 minutes? 10 minutes to somehow defeat 4 enemy ships with a vessel that was falling apart around them. On the Krath flagship, Warlord Thesk surveyed the devastation with cold fury. 8 of his ships were gone, 8 ships destroyed by a single human vessel that should have been easy prey. His fleet, his power, his reputation, all of it shattered in less than an hour. The human ship is crippled, Korth reported. They cannot survive much longer. Good Thesk's voice was a growl of hatred. Close with them. I want to finish this personally. The 4 remaining Krath ships moved forward, weapons charging for the final assault. The Resolute hung in space before them, wounded and alone but not defeated. Not yet. Tanaka watched the enemy approach and made her decision. All hands. This is the captain. Prepare for close-range combat. We're going to take that flagship down. Captain. Wells stared at her. That's suicide, maybe. Tanaka stood from her chair and walked to the forward viewport. Through it, she could see the approaching Krath vessels, their weapons glowing as they prepared to fire. But if we're going to die, we're going to do it fighting. And if we can take their leader with us, the rest might break. It was a desperate plan. It relied on the Krath losing their nerve once their warlord fell. It relied on the Resolute surviving long enough to reach the flagship. It relied on a dozen things that might not happen. But it was the only chance they had. Helm, Tanaka said. Full power to engines. Ram them if you have to. Aye, Captain. The Resolute surged forward, its damaged engines screaming in protest. It was not a retreat. It was not evasion. It was a charge, straight at the heart of the enemy formation. The Krath ships fired. Beams of energy and explosive projectiles slammed into the human vessel. More alarms sounded. More systems failed. The ship shook so hard that crew members were thrown from their stations, but it kept coming. They are insane, Korth whispered on the Krath bridge. They are truly insane. Thesk watched the burning human ship come toward them, and for the first time in many years he felt something he had almost forgotten. Fear. These humans were supposed to be weak. They were supposed to be prey. But prey did not attack. Prey did not charge into certain death with weapons blazing. Fire, he screamed. Destroy them. All 4 Krath ships concentrated their fire on the Resolute. The human vessel's remaining shields collapsed under the assault. Hull plates were torn away. Entire sections were exposed to the void, and still it came. The Resolute fired its last missiles. A final salvo aimed directly at the Krath flagship. Thesk's ship tried to evade, but the distance was too short. 3 missiles struck home, blasting through weakened shields and detonating against the hull. The flagship shuddered. Explosions rippled across its surface. Systems failed. The bridge filled with smoke and screaming. Korth was thrown across the room by the impact. When he looked up, he saw that half his crew was dead or dying. Thesk was still standing, but blood was running down his face and one of his arms hung useless at his side. Damage report, the warlord demanded. Engines offline, weapons at 30%, hull breaches on multiple decks. Korth's voice was shaking. Warlord, we must retreat. Never. Thesk roared. I will not flee from these animals. But his remaining ships were not listening to his pride. The 2 escorts had seen 8 of their sisters destroyed. They had watched the human ship take everything they could throw at it and keep fighting. They had seen their flagship burning. Their courage broke. Without orders, without permission, the 2 escort ships began to turn away. Their engines fired, carrying them toward the edge of the system. Thesk screamed. I command you to stop. But they were gone, fleeing into the darkness of space, leaving their warlord behind. The damaged Krath cruiser, the one that had been barely holding together since the early stages of the battle, followed close behind. Its crew had no desire to die for a war that was already lost. Thesk stood alone on his burning bridge, watching his fleet abandon him. The human ship hung in space before him, equally damaged, equally wounded. 2 dying vessels facing each other across the void. Open a channel, Tanaka ordered. The screen flickered and she found herself face to face with the Krath warlord. He was bloodied and beaten, but his eyes still burned with hatred. You have destroyed my fleet, Thesk said. You have ruined me, but I will take you with me to death. Your ships are gone, Tanaka replied. Your weapon systems are failing. You have nothing left. I have enough. Tanaka studied the alien face. She saw the pride, the fury, the refusal to accept defeat. She understood it, in a way. He had built his reputation on being a monster, on taking what he wanted, on never losing, and now a single human ship had torn that reputation apart. You could withdraw, she said. Take your ship and leave. Never come back to this system. That's my offer. Thesk bared his teeth. You offer me mercy. You dare. I offer you survival. Take it or leave it. The warlord's eyes flickered. For a moment, Tanaka thought he might actually accept. His ship was crippled. His fleet was scattered. He could not win this fight, but his pride would not allow it. Die with me, human, he said, and cut the channel. His flagship fired, a final desperate attack. The Resolute's damaged weapons answered. The 2 ships tore at each other across the void, pouring everything they had left into one final exchange, and then it was over. The Krath flagship went dark. Its weapons fell silent. Its engines died. It hung in space, a dead hulk, its warlord and crew silenced forever. The Resolute was not much better. Half its systems were offline. Fires still burned in a dozen compartments. The ship was held together by emergency repairs and sheer stubbornness, but it was still there, still alive. "We did it," Wells said. Her voice was disbelieving. "We actually did it." Tanaka looked at the wreckage that surrounded them, at the Krath ships that drifted in pieces through the void, at the flagship that had thought itself invincible. "Damage control teams to all decks," she said, her voice calm despite everything. "Medical teams assist the wounded, and someone get me a line to the colony." She sat back in her command chair, exhaustion finally catching up to her. 12 ships against 1. They should not have survived. By every reasonable measure, they should be dead. But they had answered a call for help, and that was what mattered. Below, on the surface of Velith Prime, the Velen watched the skies clear. The Krath blockade was gone. The enemy was defeated. They were saved, and in the shelters, in the homes, in every corner of the colony, the name Tanaka was spoken with something that sounded very much like prayer. The sun rose over Velith Prime, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. It was a beautiful dawn, the kind that the Velen had always treasured. But this dawn was different. This dawn meant survival. Colony leader Astara stood at the landing field on the outskirts of the central settlement, watching the shuttle descend from the battered ship that still orbited their world. The Resolute looked worse in the daylight than it had during the battle, its hull scarred and torn, sections open to the void. It was a miracle the ship was still functioning at all, but it was functioning, and its people had come down to help. The shuttle touched down with a gentle thud, and the hatch opened. Captain Yuki Tanaka stepped out, followed by a team of her crew carrying medical supplies and emergency equipment. Estera walked forward to meet her. Up close, the human captain looked tired. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her movements carried the weight of exhaustion. She had been awake for almost 2 days, first fighting the battle and then coordinating damage control and rescue operations. But when she saw Estara approaching, Tanaka smiled. "Colony leader," she said, "I hope you don't mind us dropping in." Estara's bioluminescence shifted to colors that the translator could not identify. She struggled to find words adequate for what she was feeling. Finally, she simply reached out and took the human's hands in her own. "You came," she said, "when no one else would. You came, we heard you calling. It seemed like the right thing to do." "The right thing to do." Estara repeated the words slowly, as if trying to understand them. "Your ship is nearly destroyed. 11 of your people are dead. You risked everything for strangers. And you call this the right thing to do?" Tanaka gently squeezed the alien's hands. "That's what it means to be human, colony leader. We can't always save everyone. We can't always win. But we can always show up. We can always try." Behind them, the human crew was already at work. Medical personnel were treating injured Velen. Engineers were helping to repair damaged systems. Supplies were being distributed to those who needed them most. They asked for nothing in return. They simply helped. Word of the battle spread quickly. Within hours, news services across the galaxy were reporting on what had happened at Velith Prime. The story was almost too incredible to believe. 1 human ship against 12 Krath raiders. A desperate battle fought to protect a species the humans had never even met. A victory that should have been impossible. The Galactic Council, which had been unable to act in time to help the Velen, now scrambled to respond to the diplomatic implications of what had happened. Some council members were concerned about human aggression. Others were embarrassed that a junior species had done what the mighty council could not. But in the far corners of the galaxy, in the forgotten colonies and the struggling outposts, in the places where no one came when you called for help, the story spread differently. They told it in whispers at first, then in excited voices. The humans came. The humans answered, when everyone else turned away, when the powerful pretended not to hear. The humans showed up and fought for strangers. On a mining station at the edge of explored space, a young refugee heard the story and felt hope for the first time in years. On a refugee transport fleeing a dying world, children listened to their parents tell the tale and learned that maybe the galaxy was not as cruel as it seemed. And on Velith Prime, the Velen gathered to honor their saviors. It was a simple ceremony. The Velen did not have much to give, but they gave what they could. They presented Captain Tanaka with a crystal formed from the combined bioluminescence of 10,000 Velen, a physical representation of their gratitude and their eternal remembrance. "This is the light of Velith," Astera explained. "It is the most precious thing we can offer. It carries the essence of our people, our hope, our love. As long as it exists, we will remember what you did for us." Tanaka held the crystal carefully. It glowed with soft blue light, warm in her hands. She looked at the gathered crowd of Velen, their skin flickering with patterns of joy and gratitude. "I will treasure this," she said, "but I want you to know something. We did not come here for rewards or recognition. We came because it was right. And if you were ever in danger again, we would come again. That is not a promise I make lightly. That is simply who we are." The ceremony ended, but the implications of what had happened continued to spread through the galaxy like ripples in water. Several weeks later, Captain Tanaka stood on the bridge of the Resolute as it finally departed Velith Prime. The ship had been repaired enough to travel, though it would need months in a proper shipyard before it was fully operational again. Commander Wells stood beside her. watching the blue and green world shrink on the view screen. The Admiral contacted me, Wells said. She wanted you to know that there will be no disciplinary action. Unofficially, she called you a reckless fool who got lucky. Officially, you've been recommended for commendation. Tanaka smiled slightly. That sounds about right. There's something else. Wells handed her a datapad. We've received 37 requests for assistance in the past week. Colonies in trouble, ships in distress, people who heard what happened here and decided to call for help. Tanaka looked at the list. 37 calls. 37 situations where people needed help and believed that humans might answer. We can't respond to all of these, she said. We're one ship. For now, Wells replied. But something's changing, Captain. Word is spreading. Other ships, other captains. They're hearing the stories. They're starting to ask themselves what they would do if they heard a call for help. Tanaka considered this. She thought about the Velen, about Esthera's words, about the way the galaxy seemed to work. The strong preyed on the weak, the powerful ignored the helpless. That was simply the way things were. But maybe it did not have to be. Set course for the nearest distress signal, she ordered. Captain. The helmsman said, that signal is 3 days away, and the ship needs repairs. The ship can hold together for 3 more days, and someone out there is calling for help. Tanaka settled into her command chair. We answer. The Resolute turned toward the void, toward whatever waited in the darkness. Behind them, Velith Prime continued its orbit, its people safe, their gratitude eternal. In the years that followed, the story of what happened at Velith Prime became legend. It was told and retold across 1,000 worlds. It changed the way the galaxy saw humanity. The humans were not numerous. They were not ancient. They were not the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced. But they had something that many older species had lost. They cared. When no one else would come, the humans came. When no one else would fight, the humans fought, not for profit, not for territory, not for power, simply because someone needed help, and that made all the difference. Somewhere in the vast emptiness between stars, another distress call echoed through the void, another forgotten species, another ignored crisis, another voice crying out for someone to listen, and somewhere in that same darkness, a human ship changed course because that was what humans did. They answered,